being around friends and family, and eating great food. We are going to start off with some interesting UFO reports. The first one occurring in Derry, New Hampshire. This occurred December 13th, 2017. Triangle in the sky. In more detail, the witness states, I was driving south on I-93 in the Derry area of New Hampshire when I saw a solid triangle in the sky heading west at a slow, steady pace. It had bluish lights at each point and a light in the middle of the underside that turned on and off, but not at regular intervals. I lost sight of the craft due to driving. I was not able to get any pictures. I have seen these types of crafts several times in the past. Well, lucky you. The next UFO sighting occurred in California. That's all it says. This happened December 14th, 2017. In brief, they say meteor-shaped object descended from the northeast. It may not be a meteor. Location of landing may be in a field. In more detail, they say sleeping when the CCTV camera recorded what appears to be a meteor. The brightness of the object appeared without making any noise. It may not be a meteor. It could be space junk. The object has a trailing appearance like a comet. This object could be space junk that landed in a field. The video of the meteor is not in color. The next UFO sighting happened in Alameda, California on December 13th, 2017. In brief, they describe two vertical lights moved slowly parallel to the ground, then changed direction and shot away. In more detail, they say, I saw it in the sky towards the southeast. I had never seen anything like it before tonight. Two lights, one directly above the other, about a car's length apart, moved very slowly directly across the sky. It moved parallel to the ground and seemed to be hovering about 200 feet off the ground. Then it slowed down, turned on a dime, and the lights either faded out or it shot off into the darkness. It was difficult to tell which, though I think it flew away as there was nothing there after the lights went out. The entire experience lasted about 15 seconds. From my noticing the lights, to a sense that they were something different, to watching it move across the night sky, to starting to see what seemed like an object between the two lights, though it suddenly and noticeably stopping, changing directions, and then shooting off to the dark. The next UFO sighting happened in Hooksett, New Hampshire. This occurred December 14th, 2017. They describe, I was at a stop sign and observed the triangle hovering over a field. Had blue-white lights at each point and a brighter white light in the middle of the underside. It appeared gray. Sun was not up yet. Then the lights dimmed and it slowly started moving in a straight line. I was on a back road, so lost sight of it with all the trees and turns off the road. I was not able to get a good picture of it, but I have seen the triangle objects several times in the past. The next UFO sighting happened in Chilliwack, British Columbia on September 19th, 2017. In brief, they say, saw a donut-shaped UFO outside of my house. In more detail, they say, I was on my way home with my father from 7-Eleven, and it was just after 5 a.m. Just as we got back, I noticed a bright light in the sky. I frequently look at the night sky in our area, so I know this object was never there before, as I've lived in this house for the last 3 years. My dad thought it was the moon, and he went inside. But it wasn't the moon. It was a donut-shaped UFO with a circular in shape. Think of a circle in a circle. It did glow as bright as the moon, though a bright white. All it did was hover in the same area for about 40 minutes, and it made no noise whatsoever. I was just fine while watching the craft and felt comfortable and wasn't scared. I even took a picture of it that I've compared to others on the internet, and it's the same craft. After observing the craft for 40 minutes, it completely disappeared and went invisible. This is all. The next UFO sighting, it says it took place in Cape Girardeau, Illinois, on December 8th, 2017 at 2200 hours. They state, I was driving with my son to go deer hunting. As I was driving through a very wooded area near the Mississippi River, I saw what I thought was a strange-looking plane. It shot straight down behind some trees, then straight up and hovered, then flew east rapidly. In more detail, they say I was driving with my son to go deer hunting in southern Illinois. We took I-55 south to Cape Girardeau and crossed the Mississippi there. It was around 10 p.m. and we were on Illinois Route 3 heading south, about to run parallel to the river. I noticed a strange-looking plane coming from the east, moving at a very slow speed. I saw it but didn't think much about it until it shot down behind some trees at an amazing speed. It moved so fast my eyes couldn't follow it. I was blown away by what I had just seen, but also confused. Then the object shot back up from behind the trees, hovered for a few seconds, shot up some more, and then flew off towards the direction it came, east. The speed that this thing was capable of was insane. It moved so fast. It was almost like it would jump locations instead of smooth movements. The whole incident left me confused by what I had witnessed and a little nervous. I bet. The next UFO report is from Fort Collins, Colorado. This is a UFO blast from the past that occurred June 15th, 2004. In brief, the witness says, I was a kid and I was woken up like I had some psychological connection to the light or aircraft I saw in the sky, and I felt like I had to watch it until it disappeared. In more detail, they state, this happened when I was in 4th grade, sometime in the summer. I only recently started sharing this experience with family and friends because my father had his own experience within the last couple of years. I remember waking up at about 3:30 a.m. on top of my bed. My bed sheets were made perfectly, all the corners crisp and everything, and my blinds were pulled tightly open. And I was incredibly awake, like I had to look out my window, and I had a feeling in my stomach, kind of like a no-gravity feeling. I looked outside in the distance directly in the west of me in my bed, and there is this very large lemon-shaped, bright yellow object very slowly traveling to my left, to south. It was going in a perfectly straight path and moving at a constant speed, what I would think to be like 3 miles per hour, but was probably a little faster given the distance it was away from me. I just kept staring and feeling the weird feeling in my stomach like I was frozen and terrified looking at this object. There was a large pine tree past the garage outside my window, and I knew that if it went behind that pine tree and did not come out the other side, I must be seeing things. I waited and waited as it slowly surfaced onto the left side of the palm tree. My best guess is that this object was around 3 to 5 football fields away. As it kept slowly moving south, it started moving towards the aspen tree that was in our front yard, and as it approached around some of the first branches, it just disappeared completely. The feeling in my stomach was let go. I became physically less tense, but then a new feeling of reality set in that made me feel incredibly fearful, scared, and confused. I felt like it wanted me to watch it, like it woke me up to watch it. I was so confused why my bed was made. I was on top of all the sheets and comforters and everything, and I was very confused why my blinds were pulled tightly open. I do not know if I did that or if something else had happened that I don't remember. I know that at that time I had watched some movie on Lifetime about a stalker, and I would always shut my blinds before the sun went down because I was scared somebody would crawl into the garage and could see me through my windows, so I knew I had to have closed those blinds. I also never made my bed, especially that neat, but I really have no explanation to those parts of my experience. I also remember there was no sound that I could hear from the object, and my window was closed. But I could usually hear the cars on the street outside of my house, and I could see the lights from the cars, but during the few minutes I saw the object, I don't remember seeing any cars going down that street or my street. I know I didn't see any other objects like airplanes or anything in the sky, and it was crystal clear out that night. I do remember seeing stars in the sky. The whole experience was maybe 5 to 8 minutes, and it felt like the world was absolutely silent and still while I had this weird and frightening connection experience to this object. I have to tell you, it sounds like an alien abduction aftermath to me. What do you guys think? I think it does sound like that. The next UFO sighting occurred in Dunbar. This is another UFO blast from the past. This occurred October 15th, the year 2000. In brief, they say the account I am giving, called My Story, was the beginning of things. The picture of the female was similar to one I saw in an experience I had after. In more detail, they say I was at the top of a hill where I had an overwhelming feeling to go there. I got out of the car is when I saw the object coming towards me. When I first noticed it, I was unsure of what it was as it got closer. I thought it was a UFO. When it got above me, I realized this was a spacecraft. There were no motions or other actions other than the lights on it moving around. My feelings were normal. No excitement, no fear. It seemed perfectly normal to me. After the incident, I questioned myself about how I felt no fear and normal for me, which I found strange. I never even told my wife about it until a while later. I lost sight of the object because I had a feeling I had to leave, which I did. I have picked Dublin for the time zone as my account took place in Scotland, and the time zone is Greenwich Mean Time, and the hour was 1935. In the continued Christmas spirit, being that Christmas was just yesterday, I'm going to share some interesting Christmas inspired paranormal stories. How's that? Talking angels, whatever. All right, so the first story I'm going to relate begins with Jackie believes that her guardian angel came to her aid on 2 occasions, helping her avoid serious injury. Most interesting, her testimony is that she actually physically felt and heard this protective force. Both happened when she was a child of kindergarten age, while at a popular sledding hill near the post office, her town. Jackie was enjoying the day with her family. The young girl decided to try the steepest part of the hill. She closed her eyes and started down. She says, I apparently hit someone going down and I was spinning out of control. I was heading for the metal guardrail. I didn't know what to do, says Jackie. I suddenly felt something push my chest down. I came within less than half an inch to the rail, but didn't hit it. I could have lost my nose. Jackie's second experience occurred during her birthday celebration at school. She had run across the playground to place her crown on a bench. While running back to her friends, 3 boys tripped her. The playground was filled with metal objects and wood chips. so it was not like the safe playgrounds today. Jackie says that she went flying and hit something just under her eye. She says, "But I felt something pull me back when I fell," says Jackie. "The teacher said that they saw me sort of fly forward then fly back at the same time. As they hurried me to the nurse's office, I heard an unfamiliar voice keep telling me, 'Don't worry, I'm here. God doesn't want anything to happen to his baby.'" Oh, that's very sweet. The next story shared in the Christmas spirit, The Reading Angel. The story begins, "It's remarkable how many stories of angels come out of hospital experiences. It may not be so hard to understand when we realize they are places of sharply focused emotions, prayers, and hope." Reader Debay entered the hospital in 1994 with acute pain from a fibroid tumor the size of a grapefruit in her uterus. The surgery was successful but more complicated than expected, and her troubles weren't over. Debay recalls that she was in horrible pain. She had an allergic reaction to the morphine she was given, and doctors were trying to counteract that with other medications. This turned a bad experience worse. Not only had she just had a major surgery and feared she might not be able to have children, she now dealt with the pain of an acute drug reaction. After receiving more pain medication, she was able to sleep for a few hours. She says, "I awoke in the middle of the night. According to the wall clock, it was 2:45. I heard someone speaking and realized someone was at my bedside," she says. "It was a young woman with short brown hair and wearing a white hospital staff uniform. She was sitting and reading aloud from the Bible. I said to her, 'Am I all right? Why are you here with me?' The woman visiting Debay stopped reading, but did not look up. She simply said, 'I was sent here to make sure you'd be all right. You are going to be fine. Now you should get some rest and go back to sleep.' She began to read again, and I drifted off back to sleep." The next morning, she explained the experience to her doctor, who checked and said that no staff had visited her overnight. She asked all the nurses, and no one knew of this visitor. Neither did anyone check her vitals that night. "To this day," she says, "I believe that I was visited by my guardian angel that night. She was sent to comfort me and assure me that I would be okay." Coincidentally, the time on the clock that night, 2:45 a.m., is the exact time recorded on my birth certificate that I was born. The next story in the theme of the Christmas spirit, Rescued from Hopelessness. Perhaps more painful than any injury or illness is the feeling of utter hopelessness, the despair of the soul that leads one to thoughts of suicide. Dean knew this pain as he was going through a divorce at the age of 26. The thought of being apart from his two young daughters was almost more than he could bear. But in one night of stormy darkness, Dean was given renewed hope. Dean worked as a derricksman on a drill rig. On this one night he was having serious thoughts of taking his life as he looked down from the 128-foot derrick. He says, "My family and I have strong beliefs in Jesus, but it was hard not to contemplate suicide," recalls Dean. "In the worst thunderstorm I'd ever seen, I climbed the derrick to take my position to pull pipe out of the hole we were drilling." His co-workers urged him not to climb the derrick, saying they'd rather have downtime than risk someone's life. Dean ignored this and began to climb. He says, "Lightning flashed all around me. Thunder boomed. I cried to God to take me. If I couldn't have my family, I didn't want to live. But I couldn't take my own life in suicide. God spared me. I don't know how I survived that night, but I did. A couple of weeks later, I bought a small Bible and traveled to the Peace River Hills where my family has lived for so long. I sat down on top of one of the green hills and started to read. I had such a warm feeling enter into me as the sun parted through the clouds and shone on me. It was raining all around me, but I was dry and warm in my small spot on top of that hill. Dean says that these moments changed his life for the better. He met his new wife and fell in love. They started a family together that includes his 2 daughters. He says, "Thank you, Lord Jesus, and the angels you sent that day to touch my soul." The next story, in the theme of the Christmas spirit here, is entitled Beautiful, Strange UFO or Angel. Some researchers think that there might be a connection between UFOs and angel sightings. They say the angels and heavenly figures encountered in the Bible might actually have been extraterrestrials. After his experience in the 1980s with the most beautiful thing he ever saw, Lewis might agree with that assessment. He begins, "It was a Saturday morning in Mariposa, California, and Lewis had to work that day. The air was freshly washed from a cool rain the night before, and the morning sky was bright with a deep blue sky and a few scattered cumulus clouds." He says, "I was heading out of my car in the back parking lot of the apartment complex where I lived when I noticed someone kneeling next to my car. This person saw me and quickly stood up, holding a crowbar." The young man was quite obviously startled by Lewis's interruption, and although Lewis sensed the boy was up to no good, he hadn't yet hit him what he was doing. Then Lewis looked through the passenger window of his car and saw that the steering wheel column had been stripped of its cover, and he realized that the young man was trying to steal his car. "I asked him what the heck he was doing," Lewis recalls. "He gave me a lame story about his friend's car being stolen last night and that my car looked like his friend's and so on. I didn't want to hear it. I told him I was going to call the police, which I did on my cell phone." Lewis dialed 911 and gave the dispatcher the address. He told the would-be thief that the police were on their way and warned him not to leave. The boy said he would wait for the police. But Lewis could tell he was just waiting for the right moment to make a run for it. "If he did, I wasn't going to try to stop him because his adrenaline was pumping and he had that crowbar," Lewis says. As Lewis was grilling the young man, trying to detain him, he began to notice 3 rather large clouds in a single file formation that were almost overhead. Then he caught a flash of something out of the corner of his eye. "Then I saw it," he says, "a shiny object exiting from the first cloud and entering the next and then coming out of that one. It was shiny, like brightly polished chrome, and moving at a good speed. I couldn't make out the shape." By this time, Lewis was so distracted by the UFO that the punk saw his chance and took off. That's when the object entered the last cloud. From there, it was nothing but open sky. "When it emerged, my life changed," Lewis says. There, against the richness of the blue sky, was a silvery shape that seemed to have arms and legs. It was so beautiful to look at. At the same time, it had the appearance of metal. It looked like some kind of ship with a strange design. The best way I can describe it is it looked like silverware in the design of the stick man children draw. It was huge, moving fast and made no noise. As it sailed overhead, some of the limbs would move up and down, giving the impression of being alive. A living entity. It made a couple of rolls, reflecting the sun in every direction. Just beautiful. Oh my God, beautiful. As it started to fade away from my view, I found myself short of breath and with tears running down my cheeks. It had that much of an effect on me. I began thinking maybe that's what an angel looks like. Maybe not. The next story, in the spirit of Christmas, angel money. There are many stories of people receiving much needed money from mysterious, unknown sources. Ellie has such a story that recalls from the summer of January 1994 in the suburb of Thornbury, Melbourne, Australia. It was late afternoon, and Ellie was outside on this warm day gathering the family laundry from the clothesline. There was a sudden small willy-willy, an Australian term for a swirling wind funnel of dust and leaves. She says, as it raced past me, I saw something blue whirling in the middle of the dust and leaves and managed to grab a hold of it, she says. I was surprised and very pleased to see it was a $10 bill. A few days later, Ellie was at the back of the yard checking on her garden tomatoes when she spotted something laying in the grass. She was astonished to find it was a $20 bill. Not long afterward, in another part of the garden, she found a $5 bill and yet another $20 bill nestled among the leaves of the daylilies. By this time, I told my family of the angel money, she tells us. None of them had put money there, not with the possibility of it blowing away in the often high winds of the summer. All was quiet for a few days. Then one of my sons came in with an ear-to-ear grin and a $20 bill that he had just found on top of the compost heap. Now most of us would rationalize that this was not angel money at all, but that it had simply blown into Ellie's yard from some poor soul who lost it. But Ellie's not quite convinced of that explanation because of one more interesting find, this time in her house. A week or so later, she remembers well, I was cleaning out under the bed and pulled out a pair of slippers. And there, nestling in the toe of one, like a little grace note, was a 50-cent coin. Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you all so much for listening to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis, and be sure to check out UFOHeadlineNews.com every single day. And also tune into my other weekly show, The Outlander, which is every Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and catch my paranormal comic, The Outlanders. Direct links can be found at HeidiHollis.com, or you could always go to Inception Radio.